Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I think this is the first video I've posted with my mic where I've had over 100 subs, so thank you so much for that. This can be considered my 100 sub special, although I have a few challenge runs in the works. I'm not sure how well that'll do. But today we're going to be ranking every Fire Emblem game, in order from worst to best. So let's get started. And the worst Fire Emblem game in my opinion is Fire Emblem Fates Revelation. Now, Fire Emblem Fates Revelation, admittedly I'm not a big fan of the Fates series in general, so I'm a little bit biased towards that, but Revelation I just find boring. Like, the maps are boring and tedious. The story, well, it's Fates, so that's already a mark against it there. But I guess it's good if you want to have like a big cast and for like completionists. I mean, I do see the appeal of getting all your characters and shipping them, making pairings that you couldn't normally make. But to me, Fates is just, well, Revelation in general is just a very boring game. I know I don't have much to say about it, but as we go higher up on the tier list, I'll have more and more things to say about the games. Just Revelation and like the bottom two games, I don't care much about at all. Next up will be, I'm sure you couldn't guess based off of what I was saying about Revelation, but the next is Fire Emblem Fates Birthright. Now, the problems I have with Birthright are pretty similar to Revelation. I mean, the maps are a bit better, they're a bit boring still, but they're less gimmicky. But it's just boring, like, it's super easy. Like, Ryoma breaks the game, but I just don't like the pairing system in Fates as much as other games like Awakening or Genealogy. Those two games, I reckon, do it better and are just more appealing to me gameplay-wise. I feel like the changes Fates made to pair up, well, admittedly make it more balanced. It's just less fun. But this is coming from a guy who doesn't really enjoy Fates, so I haven't really delved into like the intricacies of the gameplay. So I may just be talking like just scrub quotes over here. I may be ignorant to the deeper intricacies with Fates, because all the other Fire Emblem games I've played more than twice. Fates in general, I believe I've only played each route twice. So yeah, next is Birthright. I don't like it. I mean, if a beginner to the Fire Emblem series is going to ask me what I think, where they should start, Birthright, along with other games, would definitely be up there with the first one to start off with. Up on the list is not going to be Conquest. It's going to be Fire Emblem 1, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. Now, with the other two games I don't care about. I don't care about Fates in general, even Conquest. But Fire Emblem 1, I feel like it's definitely aged. From a historical point of view, it's definitely aged pretty bad. Like, some of the mechanics are pretty clunky, such as the inventory system. It's a pretty slow game overall. Pretty standard story. I can't really fault it too much because it came out in 1990, I believe. But yeah, it's very standard Fire Emblem gameplay. If you want to go back and experience where Fire Emblem began, I definitely would say to try Shadow Dragon instead. Even Book 1 of Mystery of the Emblem would be, even though it's cut down, you still can experience and get the general gist of the story while having a better gameplay experience overall. But, I mean, I'm a little biased towards Fire Emblem 1. I mean, it is the original, it is where Marth comes from. So, yeah, Fire Emblem 1, good game. I wouldn't really recommend playing it all the way through, unless you're like me and really love Fire Emblem. But I would definitely recommend playing the first few chapters if you want to try and get the gist of the gameplay and just understand it from a historical point of view. But if you want to experience Marth's story, play Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon or Mystery of the Emblem. Next up on the list is going to be Fire Emblem Gaiden, the black sheep of the franchise. Now, with Gaiden, it's a big gameplay. There's a big gameplay shift from Fire Emblem 1 to 2, and you could really tell that they were experimenting with some new gameplay systems. I feel like while Fire Emblem 1 and 2 are very slow, I feel like with the exploration that you get in the dungeons, I feel like there's enough of a gameplay shift to where you can kind of ignore the tedium of the combat, because the game mixes it up with dungeon exploration, and you really feel that old NES charm, well, in this case Famicom charm, by some of the chests are very hidden, and like you have to go into secret walls, and it's kind of like, it kind of has that original Zelda feel, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, Fire Emblem Gaiden, it's not really much of a reason to play it, since Echoes just does what it does better. So this is pretty much as high as it can go on the list, unfortunately. But Gaiden, I would recommend playing it over Fire Emblem 1. That's going to be a hot take for sure. Now we're moving on to the games where I actually have a few things to say about them. Next of all, starting off the good tier, will be... this may hurt some feelings, but... Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. Now, as with all the other Fates games, story's bad, blah blah blah, we know this. I actually don't like the gameplay as much as... I think it may be overrated. Granted, I am a Fate scrub. I haven't really delved into like the meta of Fire Emblem Fates as much as I have, say, I don't know, Echoes, for example. But yeah, I feel like I don't really like any of the characters in Conquest outside of Xander. Xander in Conquest is good. We don't talk about Birthright Xander. But it has been a while since I've played any of the Fates games, so maybe warranted another playthrough. See how my feelings evolve. Now for the next game, it will be the start of the SNES era. And that'll be started off with not Fire Emblem 3, but Thracia 776. Now, the positives for the game. I really like Leaf as a protagonist. He's probably up there with Ike and Micaiah as some of my favorite protagonists in the series. The gameplay story integration is also very good. Like, in the early game, you really feel the struggle of Leaf, as you have to capture enemies in order to gain like new equipment, because you don't really have a lot of money at the start of Thracia. And I just like the story as a whole. Leaf's struggle and eventually overcoming Raedric and Veld, and then meeting up with Seliph. It's pretty good. Now for the negatives. It's very punishing on a blind playthrough. I do not like Thracia Fog. Thracia Fog is just stupid. Like, just not being able to see in general. I'm really glad they ditched that for all future appearances of the Fog of War mechanic. Status saves, I really don't like them. This will be a criticism with some of the other Fire Emblems. And 24X. Fuck that chapter. Continuing on the Jugdraw train will be Genealogy of the Holy War. Now, the positives. I do like the story. Probably about as much as I like Thracia's story, which is a lot. And I really like the whole pairing aspect as, well, not communicated to the player as well as I think it should be. But then again, it is from the SNES era, so I can't really fault it too much for that. Now, the negatives of Genealogy. The maps. Come on. That's pretty obvious. The maps are just huge. Although, it does really sell the story pretty well. With like full-scale war, and you're traversing these big maps, conquering countries, and everything in like one chapter. secret events. Yeah, they're a bit too obscure. I don't think, at least with some of them, from ones that come to mind, it would be the Arden secret event in Chapter 2, I believe, and then the Lex Brave Axe in Chapter 1. As far as I'm aware, these aren't communicated to the player, because of course they're secret events, they're meant to be secretive. But still, I feel like there should at least be some sort of hint towards it. Holy Blood is a bit too broken. I get that, well, the Holy Blood kids and just the Holy Blood characters in general are meant to be far stronger than their non-Holy Blood counterparts. But I feel like it's just too much of a difference. I feel like with the non-Holy Blood characters, you should give them better skills. Like, maybe all the non-Holy Blood characters have access to Pursuit by default. That would make it a lot closer, make the gap a lot closer, since I think most, if not no, definitely not all, but definitely most of the Holy Blood characters already have Pursuit by default. I feel like you should really give just all of the non-Holy Blood characters Pursuit. And more I don't criticize the secret events, but more talk conversations to boost the stats of the non-Holy Blood characters. I know they do that for the substitutes in Generation 2. I've never done a substitute only run in Fire Emblem 4, but I feel like even in Gen 1, they should do more talk conversations between the non-Holy Blood characters, giving them, say, exclusive weapons, well, as exclusive as it can be in Genealogy, but like Finn's Brave Lance in Chapter 1? Yeah, Chapter 1, talking to Quan. I reckon there should have been more of that in Thracia to sort of not even out the gap. There should still be a noticeable gap, but not as significant as it is in base Genealogy. Real quick, I made a slight mistake with the tier list. Genealogy goes up here. But for the next game, and that will be Fire Emblem Awakening. Now, the positives of Awakening are it's very easy to pick up and play. Being on the 3DS, and it's portable. You can take it on the road. Unlike other games, such as, I know emulation exists, but talking about on their original hardware. It's very easy to pick up and play. It's accessible for new players. Pretty low difficulty. It has recognizable characters like Chrom, Lucina, Robin are all in Smash Bros. And well, Smash is played by a lot of people. It's good for shippers, you know. Kind of takes upon the genealogy system and expands it with support conversations. We'll talk about that later when we get to the GBA games. But builds upon that system and pairs it with the romance system of Fire Emblem 4 to allow you to have kids. Although I don't really like... I mean, the time travel explanation is better than, say, Faces, like where the in a different... I think it's a different dimension where they age faster. I don't know, it's been a while since I played Fates. But I do think it's an alright explanation. Now, the negatives. The gap in difficulties is bad. Like, normal to hard is fine. It's a bit of an increase, but it's manageable. I reckon if you're a first time player and you went and beat normal and then be like, oh, I really like this game, let me replay it on hard mode, be okay. But then, the jump from hard to lunatic is crazy. I really think it's badly designed. I feel like Lunatic Plus should have been what Lunatic is normally, and then Lunatic just being a step below that. Also, its characters aren't the deepest, like they're a bit one note and one dimensional, but I feel like it's alright. And well, Mr. Positive, it saved the franchise, and that's why I'm talking about it today. Next up on the list will be Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. I feel like this game is really overhated and underappreciated, but let's go over why I think it's where it is on the tier list. As for the positives, it's a simple but good story. It stars the poster boy of the franchise Marth, so yeah, it's a bit basic, but it's a remake based off of a game from 1990. A number of difficulties makes it perfect for repeat playthroughs. You have 6 difficulties in total, so each playthrough you can turn up the difficulty slightly in order to challenge yourself a bit more. And the replacement characters make it perfect for Iron Man runs. I actually don't really think having to kill off characters to access different chapters in the story is necessarily a bad idea. The game was built around permadeath, so if you're constantly resetting to keep your characters alive, then yeah, sure, you don't get to experience the new content. But the negatives will be the game's art style. Like for the promo art and everything, it's really good. I like it quite a lot. But in game, makes all the characters look a bit lifeless. Same goes with the animations. They're pretty bad, especially coming off of Radiant Dawn being the previous Fire Emblem game, and then the previous 2D Fire Emblems being the GBA games, which we'll be talking about in a minute. But they have fantastic animation. Also, no supports. The only time you'll see a character get dialogue is if they're important to the main story, their recruitment text, or even just their death text, which leads to a lot of the characters being just with like stats with a face attached to it. You don't really get attached to the characters as much in this game in comparison to the other games. As for the next game on the list, it'll be Fire Emblem Blazing Blade, or just Fire Emblem here in the West. As for the positives, well, it's GBA Fire Emblem. The animations are peak, and just the art style in general. It's amazing. It's the very first game to release overseas. If it wasn't for this game, I wouldn't be here talking about Fire Emblem. I guess you can kind of thank the release of Advance Wars and Marth and Roy in Melee for that. But it's also very accessible for new players, having a tutorial, having a relatively low difficulty, and good replayability considering how you have Eliwood Normal, Eliwood Hard, and then Hector Normal, Hector Hard. As for the negatives, the bad villains, I really do not like Nurgle and what's his name? Ephidel or whatever. I don't really like the Black Fang. I feel like they shouldn't have made a prequel to Binding Blade. But that's just me in general. The final weapons are terrible. Like Durandal, Armads, and Soulcardy, especially Soulcardy, are all terrible. They increase the weight from their, well, at least in the case of Armads and Durandal, they increase the weight of them from FE6, and just slows down Eliwood and Hector by too much. And the Soulcardy. Now you see, that's just terrible. That's just terrible design. The pre-promotes in the game are too strong. Everyone knows Pent and Harkin. They're just ridiculous and just can carry the back half of your run on their own, pretty much. And also Eliwood being confused for Roy. Oh wait, I'm too young for that. Next up on the list will be Binding Blade. Now, the positives of Binding Blade are Roy being added to Smash alongside Marth helped bring the game out of Japan. But, I mean, that's more so a factor of Melee, more so than than Binding Blade. But I feel like if instead of Roy it was, say, Leaf, which was the original plan, I don't think would have caught on as well. But apart from that, it being a step down difficulty-wise from the aforementioned Thracia and like Leaf makes it pretty perfect difficulty-wise, at least in terms for me. GBA FE, and then same with FE7. GBA FE is just peak Fire Emblem, alongside the animations being great. Negatives. Roy is a pretty boring protagonist. Binding Blade, especially in comparison to the other two GBA games, is a bit too simplistic for my liking. And I would hazard a guess saying that most of his popularity comes from Smash Bros. And in terms of personality, they're not alike at all. So it may lead to some disappointment when going from, say, Smash Bros. Roy to Fire Emblem Roy. Next up on the list will be Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. Here. Positives, like with the other GBA games, it's GBA FE. GBA FE is peak. Animations are great. It's pretty approachable for newcomers with the grinding and the Tower of Volney if you want to grind. I mean, be my guest. I'm not a fan of it in most cases, but hey, it's Fire Emblem. Play it your game. Play it your way, I should say. Single player game. Who gives a shit what you do? But as for negatives, it's a pretty easy game for someone like me, a Fire Emblem veteran. Yeah, I don't really have much to talk about with Sacred Stones. It's kind of the one I just skip through the story the most and just play out of the GBA games. The next game on the list, well, before we begin, I'll probably move Sacred Stones up here. But for the next game on the list will be Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, Three Houses, obviously, in its heyday, was a very, very popular game. Still the best-selling Fire Emblem
Long
game.
ago, the divine Ceros received a revelation from the goddess.
As for the positives of Three Houses, the deep customization, being able to fine-tune each student the way you like, being a teacher and like the whole teacher dynamic with the students really helps you form a connection with the students. That, alongside with the fantastic voice acting, really helps in that aspect. Also like the game's music, of course, you have the classics, God-shattering stuff, that looks really good. Bit basic of a take, but yeah, it is very good. Now the negatives of Three Houses.
Give me orders.
Of course, it's going to have to be the reused maps. Maps like the Rhonda Field battle. That map gets reused a fair bit. Of course, you have like every route goes through that.
Such a brutal,
you also have
irrational world we live in. Some believe the crest, tokens of the goddess's power, are necessary to maintain order.
Standard
but they're wrong,
map,
teacher.
That you do
The
against
crests are to blame.
Paralog. Anna's Paralog, I believe, is one of them. So yeah, maps clearly not a priority in the development of the game. Shit visuals. I feel like the Switch is pretty underpowered, but the graphics are still like... Come on, man. You upscale Radiant Dawn to 1080p, and well, that's almost as good as Three Houses. Maybe even on par a bit better. Granted, the scope of Three Houses is a lot bigger than Radiant Dawn, but still, come on. It's been what? 8 years since Radiant Dawn? Yeah, 2008, 2009 to 20... no, sorry, 20 years before. Not really that much better. Alongside this individual, you have to be the monastery. Now, especially on repeat playthroughs, this gets really boring. I've completed 2 playthroughs of each of the games.
Take your first
well, each of the routes, I should say.
Now or never.
My god, the worst part of the game has to be the monastery. It's so annoying. Sure, like, you can optimize it to a point where it takes like
return
10,
here someday,
not
my
even
teacher.
10 minutes. But still, having
Promise me
to play optimal, having to do that every single time, during every single week of the game, it just really drains you. But yeah, that's all I have to say for Three Houses. The next one on the list will be Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem. Now, when I originally went through this just on my own, I was surprised that Fire Emblem 3 ended up so high. But then I gave it a bit of a thought, and well, it really does not tower, but really does stand out to me amongst the rest of the games so far. Now, as for the positives, I'd say it's the first Fire Emblem, chronologically, that I would consider better than just okay, as you can see here with Fire Emblem 1 and 2. Fire Emblem 3 is just a massive step up from the first two. First of all, the graphics. Just SNES like SNES sprite art, like I said in the Fire Emblem 4 and Fire Emblem 5 sections, is just timeless. And I think that's more so for Fire Emblem 3 as opposed to Fire Emblem 4 and 5. I don't know why. I feel like the simple like anime style, sure, it's very 90s, especially with the box art and like the promo art, but it just doesn't age. It's also pretty simple mechanically. I feel like Fire Emblem 3 would actually be a good entry point into the series, as strange as that may sound. At least if it wasn't for the fact that it's a sequel to Fire Emblem 1. But I guess you can get the gist of the story from playing Book 1. As for the negatives, I don't really have a lot of negatives for this one. It's pretty much just cutting characters and maps. But I understand why, for size and time. I think it was just a size thing. Like they didn't have enough space on the cart. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Next up on the list will actually be the game's remake, Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem, or just FE12. Now, the positives, I actually think that DSFE is very, very good in terms of gameplay, that is. Art style, not so much, but the Mystery of the Emblem remake actually improves on Shadow Dragon's graphics. And while it's still not my favorite, it's at least far better than Shadow Dragon's graphics. I really, again, it's the reason why this can't move up any higher despite me absolutely loving DSFE gameplay. And there's tons of replayability because DSFE, this applies to Shadow Dragon as well, but New Mystery even more so, has like a massive cast, so you can just play with like, I don't know, freaking, God, I haven't played FE12 in ages, like Dice and Malice, with like freaking Chris, Marth, Abel, whatever. Anyway, the negatives, I think you can see this coming, but that man there, Chris, I don't really like Chris as a character. And the original story from FE3 is kind of butchered a bit because of Chris' inclusion. Yeah, but you can always just skip the story. It's why it can't be any higher than number 5 on the list. Next up on the list is going to be a game that I have a lot of emotional attachment to, as it was my first Fire Emblem game. But it used to be my favorite, but over the years it has slipped a little, and that would be Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. Now then, for the positives, beautiful presentation. Like the artwork of the game, it's just absolutely incredible. It's fantastic. Also, the voice acting, like the performances in that game are just incredible. Also, the animations, I feel like, are a step up from Awakening and Fates in terms of their impact and weight. Like, it actually feels like when you like crit an enemy with like a Golden Knight, you actually feel the impact, like as the swing happens and then boom, stab into the enemy. Compared to like Awakenings, like jumping into the air with like Chrom, for example, jumping in the air and then just smacking an enemy with his sword. It doesn't feel as impactful as Echoes' crit animations. But the negatives, there are a few negatives, and it's why it slipped down from my favorite. Those would be the reused maps, like with like with Three Houses. That's a bit of a problem with Echoes. The maps are quite boring. The enemy placement can also be a bit off, like those two Cavaliers on Olm's map being on like the top left side of the map, whereas all the other enemies that Olm will fight before that will be like in the towards the bottom right side of the map. And then also Act 4 Celica. Like, come on. Trusting Jeddah, believing Jeddah, really? Come on. Like, it's just not a good look. Now then, for the top 3. In third place will be Fire Emblem Engage, do I want to put it here in the God tier? Nah, Top Fantastic seems alright. Now, for the positives of Engage, those would have to be the vibrant art style. Like, the game really just pops as like a big step up from Three Houses, which visuals are kind of lacking. It's one of the weak points of the game, as mentioned previously. Bringing back all the emblems from the previous game, bring back all the characters from the previous games as emblems, is really good nostalgia bait. For me personally, as I've played and beaten every single Fire Emblem game at least twice, and I think the gameplay is the best in the series by far. Now, as for the negatives, bad story. We all know this. Like with what other game? Yeah, like with the Fate series, has a pretty bad story. But again, you can just skip it. But it is still a legitimate knock against the game. Just because you can skip it doesn't mean it's not a legit problem. Also, the character designs. I'm not really a fan of them. Like Ivy's little hat and like Celine's dress. I'm just not a fan of it. But other than that, it is a very good game. I would highly recommend playing it if you haven't played it before. Especially if you've played through all the other Fire Emblem games. Just to see your favourite characters come back. And now we come to the final two. Now, I don't really consider myself a Tellius fanboy, but when I think my favourite Fire Emblem games, it really comes down to these two. Now, by revealing number two, obviously that's going to spoil number one. And I think... no, I know that for me at least, it's going to hurt some feelings. I think number two goes to Path of Radiance in the God tier. Now, with Path of Radiance, the positives go as follows. Now, it has a pretty good story, you know, very likable characters. Ike as well, a nice, pretty good protagonist. He's probably up there as one of my favorites. He's probably number two behind, well, it's Micaiah. There's bonus XP as a mechanic, although very abusable. I do quite like it, as you can use it to catch up characters that are falling behind, or you can just make your already good characters super broken. It's low difficulty, at least on easy mode. At least, yeah, easy, normal, and even sometimes hard. It's pretty easy, and that makes it pretty approachable for new players. At least to me, it's very replayable. I've played it a good 12 to 15 times, start to finish, and I love the character designs. Ike, Mia, Grail, even Ashnard, I love Ashnard. Black Knight, a bit bulky, but I do like him quite a lot. Now, the negatives. It is a little slow compared to, say, the GBA titles, and even its sequel, Radiant Dawn. It is a little slow. All the difficulties are somewhat easy, except Maniac. Maniac is unfun, so I really don't like playing Maniac. I've only ever done one playthrough, and even then I haven't finished that playthrough because it's just so boring. Like, enemies are really bulky, it's hard to kill, and along with the slower than average speed of Path of Radiance, it's just not fun. And like mentioned before, bonus XP is super broken. It's a positive, but it's also a negative to me. And of course, that leads Radiant Dawn to being number one for me. Well, I reckon a lot of people would disagree with me on this, but I don't know. It's just my favorite game. Now, here's the positives, at least to me. The third tier classes are very fun. They're super broken and game breaking. Well, except Whisper, but is anyone really surprised? With like you have skills like Astra, Soul, Luna. All of them are pretty much one-shot kills unless you're using Soul on Mist, in which, well, you'll do like 40 damage max. The third tier also helps in my next point, being character progression. Like, seeing Edward go from like a level 4 Myrmidon, like 2 rounding enemies, to Edward becoming like a level 20 not sword master, true blade in the end game. Just Astraing, hitting Astra on generals and just comboing them to death. It's really fun. I think the animations are also a step up. This is something I forgot to mention in Path of Radiance, but I think the animations are kind of mid. But in Radiant Dawn, you have Volk activating lethality and like twirling his knife around before rushing in and slashing the enemy. Kind of reminds me of Akuma's Raging Demon from Street Fighter. The game's Jagan, Soth, isn't game breaking like other Jagans such as Seth and Titania in Sacred Stones and Path of Radiance respectively. And I feel like the army split that the game does is pretty well executed. Although I don't like Part 4. Now for the negatives, I don't have these written down yet. It's coming off the dome. But the latter half of Radiant Dawn kinda sucks. I reckon from about 3-8 to 3-11 in Part 3, obviously. And then all of Part 4 was trash, and then the game picks up again around endgame. I reckon that's not it at all. The Blood Pact is kinda icky as a plot device, forcing Micaiah to fight Ike. But other than that, I feel like Radiant Dawn is a pretty good Fire Emblem game. If you haven't played it, well, play it. I've beaten it about 19 times, and I'm on my 20th playthrough of it. So yeah, this is my tier list. Is there anything I want to change? This is all good. Try not to roast me too hard in the comments. But yeah, that's my tier list. I'll see you next time.